reportedly sent its troops into one of the most volatile pockets of the world inside the DRC after the Kinshasa government gave the green light. The Army's Air Force and artillery units hit various camps in North Kivu and Ituri of the Allied Democratic Forces, a rebel group that recently paid allegiance to the ISIS and is now seeking to establish a caliphate in Central Africa. But it's not clear yet how much damage the strikes inflicted on the ADF, as Congo's ailing roads have restricted movement into the forested depths. Government is yet to brief Parliament about this mission, as many questions remain unanswered. How long will the UPDF stay in Congo, for instance? What are the operational zones? What is the exit strategy? As the specter of a regional war continues to haunt the restive Great Lakes, is Uganda once again being drawn into the crosshairs? To discuss this subject, we have a panel of three, including Professor Ogenga Otunu, a historian and scholar based in the US, Andrew Mwende, journalist and old man of the clan, and
grandfather to all,
Hassan Kaps Fungaru, the Obongi County MP. Professor, to begin with you, you teach history, and history is replete with lessons about invasions in the Congo from the days of Leopold and recently when Uganda was in the DR Congo and a couple of other countries came into the DR Congo in what Gerard Prunier called Africa's First World War. Are there any lessons that we need to put into context today? We may, appear to have a legitimate reason. We've had bomb attacks here. We know the ADF has been operating in, sanctuaries inside the DR Congo. What's your take on this?
Well, thank you very much, and greetings to the audience. I don't know how far back one has to go into history, but perhaps the most important thing to do first is to begin by looking at the most recent events that as led to Uganda's participation in the war in the Congo now, which is the terrorist activities in October and November in Uganda, and if one puts that in perspective in terms of the regional analysis, the ADF one is talking about here, essentially, is a tiny fraction, it's a small fraction of what the ADF was. That is about 1995, thereabout, when it announced its presence. And then when it was literally defeated from Uganda, it retreated into the DRC. And it is split into two groups. One is a tiny part, which it calls itself ADF. The other one has now baptized itself in a totally different name. In terms of the history, one perhaps want to, I think my good friend Mwenda spoke to it, I think, in one of his articles as well. The war we had about 1998, coming all the way to 2003, war between Uganda and Rwanda about 1999, 2000, sucking us in. So in terms of our presence now, one has to first pay attention to what the government says. I think the overriding factor that's taken us to the Congo is essentially to flush out the terrorists who attacked us. And that seems to be the primary motive. There might be a number of other competing motives, which our government, like every other government that goes to war, may not find it plausible enough to explain to the citizens, because it complicates the primary motive. I think the presence in the Congo is legitimate. Legitimate because if one believes the intelligence, that intelligence is credible, then those who attacked us had some connection with the ADF, quote-unquote ADF in the DRC. There's also the possibility that the so-called ADF has connection with Mozambique, has connection with Tanzania, has connection with Burundi, has connection with Kenya, has connection with Al-Shabaab in Somalia, which then complicates the whole thing. So I'm not terribly sure we know precisely where they came from, but at least they advertise the attack as their own, either because they want to continue receiving assistance from the Middle East and other places, because as you know now, the ADF, the so-called ADF in the DRC, is multinational in nature. You have Ugandans there, you have Congolese there, you have Tanzanians there, you have Rwandese there, you have Burundians there, you have Kenyans there, okay, you have Somalis there, okay. It's multinational in its composition. And so perhaps that's all I can say for now, that if we can draw lessons from history, then the lesson is not why we are there, rather how we should conduct the war, avoid reminding the people, the Congolese, of our presence, earlier presence there, which is extremely resented in the Congo for good reasons, because as the international community pointed out, the UN, for example, National Criminal Court has pointed out, we engaged in unlawful activities there, rape of people around there, plunder of resources in the area. And so you have, even up to now, you have opposition coming from a segment of the elites in the DRC against our presence there. But I think our presence is legitimate. This time around, we did not go on our own. We sought the arrangement with the government of DRC. And that is precisely what should be done. You need to coordinate intelligence. You need to work together with your regional allies in order to fight this regional and international threat, which is the ADF.
Andrew Mwenda, to bring you in, for quite some time you keenly cover, you as a journalist, you keenly cover activities of the army, and you have quite a good number of sources in that area, and you're very close to the powers that be. What we know since the army invaded, since we sent our troops to the DR Congo about a fortnight ago, is we launched an Air Force strike and artillery strike on bases of the ADF. What we've also learned of recent is troop movement has been quite restricted as a result of Congo's ailing roads. Can you bring us up to speed in terms of how the operation is going? For instance, I've seen video clips, reporters who have been able to move with the UPDF troops inside DRC territory, inside about 20 kilometers. By yesterday, they had gotten to the Semliki Bridge, which is very strategic for purposes of warfare. Please.
Well, first of all, I'm not on the ground in DRC, and sadly, I was not appointed operational commander of this deployment. I thought I could comment on the following things. I am just concerned about the overall policy. Just to inform Professor Ogengo Tunu, is in fact Uganda was invited by the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to deploy, because ADF was a big menace to the DRC. They were killing, maiming, raping people in eastern DRC. The governor, the ex-governor of Ituri province, who is Wamanyisa, whom I've been in contact with, but now he was removed because of the war. They put there a military governor. But the current governor, Wamanyisa, had called me and informed me of, and his people were always telling me about the fact that they are under serious attack from ADF, so they're complaining. The king of Mitego Kingdom, who is called Ibanda, but I do not know whether you know that there are 4 kingdoms on the other side. They speak the same language as us. Yes. They speak Rutoro. So there is the kingdom of Boga, there is the kingdom of Mitego, there is the kingdom of Esen, and the 4th kingdom. But one of the kings there, Ibanda Rutahaba, whom I know very well, has called me also and told me the same thing. I have the personal assistant to the king of Boga, who had... So these people call us and talk to us, and they have relatives there. And so I know that specific to Ituri province, especially where ADF is operating, both ordinary citizens and the elites are concerned and worried about the inability of both MONUSCO, that is the United Nations mission to Congo, and FADC, the army of Congo, their inability to protect them. People are angry with the UN, people are angry with the government army. And they were the ones asking that UPDF deploys. That is how Tshisekedi came to request President Museveni, please, can you deploy in Eastern DRC? I should also inform you from my information I have that President Museveni was reluctant. Initially, he wanted to do airstrikes and artillery strikes and let FADC and MONUSCO do the mopping up operations. But it turns out from the intelligence we have is that many members of FADC and some elements of MONUSC do actually collaborate with ADF. So ADF is not there innocently. FADC is not one coherent.
It's a complex thing which involves planned and
yes. So elements of FADC and elements of MONUSC collude with ADF. The very reason why they needed to get elements of FADC that don't collaborate with ADF to work with the UPDF to actually do a ground offensive. Now, after softening the enemy using artillery and aerial bombardment, then they deploy ground troops to do mop-up operations of the enemy. For me, of course, as a Ugandan, I have concerns about our entry into Congo. Very strong reservations. First of all, I ask, what is our overall strategic aim? Is it to degrade ADF and incapacitate it from launching attacks threatening Uganda's security, and maybe a humanitarian effort to protect Congo? Because you cannot allow ADF to organize in Congo freely until it marshals capacity to come and attack you. So it's better for you to strike them first. But also maybe Uganda has some humanitarian intention. From my conversations with the Congolese who are saying, please deploy and help us, we have a humanitarian intervention also to help the Congolese citizens. If that is our aim, if our aim is to degrade ADF to protect so that it does not attack Uganda, then the question becomes, what are the key success indicators we will look at and say our aim has been achieved? The third thing is, what is the time frame we have set within which to achieve this overall aim? And the fourth element is, what is our exit strategy? And that's where questions begin. Because questions begin when you say our exit strategy. One, we have deployed into a very complex country. As I have told you, both MONUSC and FADC collaborate with ADF. So when we go there, are we going to fight elements of MONUSC and FADC who collaborate with ADF? How are we going to relate to them? Two, ADF is not the only rebel group inside the DRC. In Ituri province, there are about 30 or 40 rebel groups. In North and South Kivu, the whole of Eastern Congo, there are about 200 armed groups.
Yeah, militias.
All of whom threaten the security of the Congolese. And when we go there, it's not just ADF threat to Uganda, but our humanitarian mission may be to help the Congolese stabilize. Are we also going to be sucked into fighting those other Mai Mai and other militias in Eastern DRC? That's the question we would like the government of Uganda to answer. The third, inside the DRC itself, the internal, intra and inter-ethnic conflicts between the Gegere and the Lendu, between the Lendu and the Hema, between the Balega and the Bahuma, they are killing each other and fighting. When we are deploying in their areas, in their kingdoms, what is the position of the UPDF and the government of Uganda? If they enter internecine warfare among themselves, are we supposed to intervene? Are we supposed to be neutral? If we intervene, on whose side and what are the grounds? You see, then there is the third element, the lure of Congolese minerals and riches, timber, gold, coltan, diamonds, name it, copper, cobalt. All these minerals have international and local traders. There are local government officials of Congo, central government officials of Congo. All these are always involved in perpetual conflict over these minerals and over trade. If we establish an administration there, how do we avoid being sucked into their conflicts? In any case, these are people, especially the local Congolese businessmen, wheeler dealers, and the international wheeler dealers. They have a lot of money. Are they not going to bribe, or for that matter, corrupt our own soldiers? Our soldiers are not angels. Are they not going to be lured by the riches of Congo, and then we get entangled? These are what we call unintended consequences, the law of unintended consequences. These are things that, if you are, strategy is a plan that anticipates likely obstacles and puts in place contingency measures to overcome them. I have been asking UPDF, they have not yet told me yet, what exactly are our contingency plans in the event of these things I am rising? How are we going to relate to the trade inside the Congo? Because we'll have established an administration. How are we going to relate to the army of Congo, to the MONUSC, to the different militias, because the ADF is not the only rebel group. So until those questions are answered, I should tell you personally, I remain in the dark, and I remain with a high degree of skepticism that this mission, I should remind you, Emma, that in fact also a Ugandan company and the Uganda government in collaboration with yes, we are building roads inside Congo. From Kasindi to Beni, Beni to Butembo. We are also building, by the way, electric transmission lines from Kasindi to Beni to Butembo, and from Beni to Bunia. Yes. Then we are also building a road from Bunagana to Goma and an electric transmission line.
Yes.
these projects will take at a very minimum 5 years. So even though we defeat ADF, we are required to be there for a while in order to provide security to our construction company to ensure that these infrastructure projects are done. The other question, who finances UPDF deployment there to provide security? And if you're going to stay there for such a long time, what are the implications of that long stay? Now, finally, I know I've spoken for long. The final concern I have is that although the elites and ordinary citizens of Eastern DRC, where we have deployed, welcome us, Eastern DRC is about 12% of the population of the whole of Congo. The mainstream Congo is very nationalistic, and what Professor Ogenga Otun was saying is correct.
The elites.
The elites in other parts of Congo who do not suffer the terrorism of ADF and other militia groups are therefore not emotionally connected to this problem. For them, they see Uganda's deployment as an abuse of Congolese sovereignty. So there is opposition to Tshisekedi in Kinshasa, in other parts of Congo against its deployment. How are we going to stay there in view of the fact that there isn't a national consensus in the country that we should be occupying a particular part of the nation? So all these issues are things that Uganda government needs to think deeply about, because it may bring us to tears.
Fantastic analysis there. And I absolutely agree with you. What is our entry and exit strategy? How about the resentment amongst the elites who are going to look at us as an occupational force? As you're aware, we've not yet resolved. We are still in court at the International Court of Justice over, you know, the case when Congo sued us, and they are demanding $4 billion. But to bring in Honorable Fungaru Hassan Caps.
It was 10 billion, which the court awarded, but I think we negotiated it to $200 million.
It's now Congo wants $4 billion, but Uganda filed a counter memorial, and one ground succeeded. But we'll come to the detail of that. Honorable Fungaru, to bring you in, we know that it's a requirement by the law that government must seek or brief parliament before they conduct or they go into this kind of deploying our armed forces outside the country. And history is littered with a number of lessons, including the late 1990s when we entered the DR Congo, and there are quite a number of dire consequences as a result of that. What exactly is the kind of deployment that we're carrying out? Is it under, for instance, the SOFA agreement under the international law? Is it a peacekeeping mission? Is it a hot pursuit? Have we been briefed in regard to this? Or else, could it turn out to be, like in the past, a case of belligerent occupation?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'm Fungaro Caps Hassan, Member of Parliament Emeritus for Bongi constituency, Shadow Minister of Defense formerly and Security, and I am speaking here not as a representative of Parliament, but as a person who knows these things. I've been in Parliament for 15 years, and in most of the times, from 2006 to 2021, I've been on the Committee of Defense and Internal Affairs, working on issues of security. I have a bit of knowledge about these things happening in the Great Lakes region here. Like Andrew Menda, I'm a son of West Nile, and the West Nilers have connections to the Congo. We know a lot about things which go in the Congo through the West Nile connections in the DRC, in South Sudan, and in Uganda. We have people, you know, in West Nile, like the Logbara. They are in Uganda, in Congo. They are Kakwa in Uganda, in Congo, and South Sudan. They are Choli in northern Uganda and South Sudan. We, therefore, are connected to these countries, just like what my brother said here. I would like the viewers who are attending to us here to take my presentation from the perspective of defense and security sector governance and the geopolitics of the region. Now, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda is the supreme law under which we operate. Under Article 210 C, which D particularly, which talks about the need for Parliament to regulate the armed forces, and particularly the deployment of the armed forces outside Uganda. This deployment has never met the criteria required as per law. Secondly, when you interact with the members of the armed forces, particularly the UPDF spokespersons, they run away from the Constitution and they want to use, they base their argument on the UPDF Act. And all of you who are highly read, like Professor here and Andrew Mwenda, also an intellectual here, you need to go into these laws of Uganda and understand them more. The UPDF Act is obsolete. The UPDF Act needed to be thrown away and replaced with a new law fit for the UPDF of today. That law was designed at the time of the NRA. For example, I'll give you one example of irregularities inside there, which you can use to see the rest. In the UPDF Act, if you look at the High Command of the UPDF, the structure of the High Command and the structure of the army itself, it is totally off. Members of the High Command listed there include General Mugusa Muntu, who is no longer in the army, General Tumufuza.
To correct you, Honorable, General Mugisha Muntu is not a member of the High Command.
I mean, this is
a member of the Army Council.
The Army Council, yes. And there are these historicals like General Tumwine, people who are no longer in the command of the army. They are still put there legalistically and permanently as members of the High Command. Then also about the structure of the army, you have the SFC being presented as a command without being authorized by the Constitution. It is the Parliament and the Constitution, under the Constitution, that it designates the structure of the army. So the law which is there for the management of the armed forces of Uganda outside and within Uganda is inadequate. Therefore, we must analyze this from the perspective of governance. Therefore, also the issue of legitimacy, which is what President Museveni is looking for, is what should not be given to them. This deployment of the UPDF to Congo is illegitimate. It is immoral. The UPDF has never been invited by the president of by the government of the Congo, as my brother presented here. I have been in touch with members of parliament there. The president also attempted to brief parliament through his ministers about the deployment. And the question we have in Uganda about the deployment of the UPDF in Congo is also the same thing about the whole country.
Honorable,
we are not talking about a segmented Congo. Congo is one, yes, Uganda is one. That's why
you say Kinshasa has not given the green light.
You see, what we need to do.
What exactly do you mean?
What I mean here is this.
There no agreement between the two countries?
Now, what is called a...
Aren't we seeing UPDF alongside FADC in the field? Now,
according to the presentation, if you go by what Andrew Mwenda is saying here, FADC, first of all, people should know is the national army of the Congo.
Yes.
And according to Andrew Mwenda, my brother here, the national army of the Congo is not coherent, it's not united in this. Which means there is a section of the national army supporting the UPDF, and there is a section opposed to it. Then do you call that a national agreement?
Even when,
so for me, I said this.
Even when George Bush
what we want to understand, yes,
with the backing of Colin Powell and the others,
yes,
it was quite a very sharply polarizing issue. Yes.
But
what turned out, let me use this example you have. Just a minute. Just let me finish.
There's an agreement signed between the government of Uganda and the government of Congo.
Let me finish on this and I come to the agreement. When you use this example of the Iraq-American war, what turned out to be the truth later on was that it was based on falsehoods and propaganda. This one is going to turn out like that. At the end of the day, you'll find that experts who are good in speaking, like my brother here, I respect you for the way you speak, even if I don't believe in what you say sometimes. You say it very well, but the thing is, President Museveni is a good expert in issues of war. You need to study the Museveni way of war. That was a different thing. He prepares people to accept him, whether you like it or not, within and outside. So what are the preparations which took place before this deployment? Museveni has been preparing for war in the Congo. The making of the roads, the plan which was stated in quotes and quote as making of roads in Congo, was actually the process of invading the Congo in this way. So
what's wrong with building roads in the Congo?
In South Sudan, when I was in parliament, we were presented with a request to build a market in South Sudan. Has that market been built? No. And at that time, it was also to prepare the ground for the UPDF to go and deploy in South Sudan. There was also a similar presentation, a request for money from Parliament that Uganda was going to build roads in South Sudan. Have the roads been built? What is that with the
Actually, in Juba is a Ugandan, a market owned by Ugandans, which I've been to physically.
Let me tell you, I've been there. Yeah. The issue of Uganda and Museveni philosophy for regime survival is this. He wants to occupy the neighboring countries, all of them. If it is possible, he should be the one even install the presidents of the neighboring countries like South Sudan, Congo, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, so that there no one will have any ground to organize.
Is a Bismarck in the group?
Something, that's what is happening here. Now, again, to present the ADF as the ADF is attacking Uganda is very wrong. It's like the ADF is different from Uganda. ADF are rebels of Uganda. And President Museveni, he's a good teacher of bad manners for all of us. Because he's the very person teaching that for you to access state power and to remain in power, you must pick a gun, go to the bush, shoot, and kill people. The same, when he remained in power, he has been doing the same. There has never been any peaceful change of government in Uganda here. And now ADF, LRA, and other rebel groups which went and are yet to come are following the Museveni path of how to capture state power. So ADF wants to capture state power. That is a rebel group of Uganda. Now when you hear this thing of Muslims, Muslims have suffered in this during the Cold War era. The geopolitics of Africa were characterized like this. If you want support, military support from the East, you must present yourself as a fighter against capitalism. And you must be a communism man, or a communist or socialist. If you want to get support from the West, you must present yourself as a fighter against communism and socialism and a promoter of capitalism. Today, this divide of the Cold War era is no longer there. That's why the only source of support is either you are supporting Muslims or in line with the war in Palestine. The biggest factor in whether or not you get support from a Muslim country or a Muslim is on the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli war. That's why, including Museveni, if you want to get support from Muslims, you must first of all say you are a Muslim. President Museveni said he was a Muslim. He had a name called Qasim. Salim Saleh said he was a Muslim. The name Saleh was given to him.
But Honorable.
Now, for the current ADF, if they call themselves Islamic State, for me I believe strongly. The only thing is maybe they want to deceive those funders of the Islamic State so that they get what?
Actually, the
arms
the UN panel of experts report exactly says that perhaps Musa Baluku is targeting the finance.
They want funds, they want money. Yes, just like President Museveni, when he wanted money and funds, he deceived Moses Ali. They went and got funds and money and guns from Libya as Muslims. But is Museveni a Muslim? Is Saif Ali a Muslim? Is Salim Saleh and the former spokesperson of the UPDF, Bantariza Shaban? All these people turned out to be non-Muslims. So, has the deception ended? No, the other people who are coming after Museveni, they may even improve on the deception and they become more expert in deceiving others in order to get support. Now, Ugandans, if you don't want rebel groups to emerge, and this is our stand as FDC, that's why FDC is called Forum for Democratic Change. We want democratic change without the barrel of the gun. Therefore, we must stick to a democratic process through which power can be acquired and lost. And therefore, there will be no need for rebellion. We need to hear from the ADF whether or not they will be accepting to come and become like us, FDC, to become a political party and compete with political power without the use of the gun. President Museveni must not deceive the whole world. What is going for there is not state security. It is not human security. It is regime security. These are the perspectives under which security is analyzed. For me, regime security is geared towards protection of the regime solely. State security is protection of the state, the sovereignty of Uganda, as you talk about.
Honorable, to be specific.
Yes.
Tomorrow, if you came into power,
yes,
and ADF is still in its sanctuary in the DR Congo, and has grown its support base with the ISIS. Are you going to invite them to the Serena for peace talks and
I will invite the ADF for peace talks and tell them if I get power through the ballot paper, I'll tell the ADF, look here, I got my power using a ballot paper. It is here. And that's if you want, come and take the ballot paper and get it. Now, ADF is President Museveni has taught people,
which is now a regional affiliate of ISIS, is saying we want to govern through Sharia law, where if you're suspected with very weak evidence to have stolen, we'll cut off your hand, where they are saying women are not going to go to work. How are you going to discuss that in the confines of Serena Hotel?
Maybe I've not seen this. If you, as a journalist, and my brother Andrew Mwenda here, has the manifesto of the ADF, you produce it for us to see. Because the manifesto is a political statement of any political group, including a rebel group like this. When the NRA was in the bush, President Museveni and the group, they had what was called a 10-point program. That was a public document. It was in the public domain. We had it all together. So where is the 10-point or the equivalent of the ADF manifesto on which you base your argument that the ADF wants to rule Uganda as Islamic State?
If you go on the internet, very simple, you will see Musa Baluku paying allegiance to ISIS. You will see evidence of Arab trainers coming into the DR jungles to train ADF on propaganda, on indoctrination, on the use of improvised explosive devices, and all these kind of things. And for purposes of credibility, from very credible sources, if you read the UN panel of experts report, which is about 400 pages. But Honorable, we'll come
now,
back
lastly, on this one, let me summarize on this. On the issue of foreign trainers, did you know that when President Seven was in the bushes of Luero here, he had experts from Korea? They were Koreans. North Korea actually.
Yes.
Those were communists, and you know North Korea up to today is a communist country.
In essence,
but is Museveni a communist today? Museveni is a capitalist 311. So these things which are done during the time of rebellion, war, etc.
So in essence, you're saying ADF can,
ADF should be invited
with the devil
for a peace talk, and Museveni must accept a genuine peace talk, so that we have democracy and good governance in Uganda, not war. But if you talk about war, you create situation for war.
Professor Genga,
yes,
to say something.
I think my brother, the Honorable, has made a lot of interesting points here. Perhaps some of the issues he raised would fall directly under durable solutions to this crisis. That is, how do we, is war sufficient? Will it resolve the conflict? What are the root causes of this conflict? Okay, or what are the root causes of this form of terrorism? But I think I understand that you know where my brother is coming from. There is an agreement, an understanding between our government and the government of the DRC, and whether this was initiated by the DRC or initiated by Uganda government is not as important now. What we know is that the two governments are working together on this, and are working together on this precisely for the reasons that my brother Mwenda mentioned. The ADF, in its you know, different formations, has unleashed a terror on the community in the DRC for a long time, and the government in the DRC, we have almost a failed state in a sense. We have part of the country that functions. We have a part of the country in eastern DRC, for example, where, as my brother Mwenda correctly indicated,
not grandfather. Okay,
that you have close to at least close to about 120 armed militias in the eastern DRC. That is almost a suspended state. Okay, it's a warlord state in that territory, and so the government in Kinshasa knows very well. It does not have effective control in the area in eastern DRC. It knows very well there is discontent. The state is falling apart in that area. It is incapable of controlling. And so it makes perfect sense for it, aware of the fact that DRC is killing people in DRC, in ADF, in the area, and unable to control that. Yes. For it to appeal to Uganda government to work together, because Uganda government is also facing terror activities coming from the same source. That is why a regional arrangement is important. Okay, the presence of Uganda in the DRC must be seen in that context. As a matter of fact, it will also be important to try and find a way of bringing in Rwanda, for example, because as you know from your own from the report a while ago, about 13 people were captured in Kigali. They were they intended to explode. Okay, bombs in the area, and they're somewhat connected with Al-Shabaab, somewhat connected with ADF. But there's also from Kigali, the perception in this section of Kigali, because here again, I think we all understand the way governments function. Okay, you have the war party, the peace party within a government. The war party in Kigali, you have peace party as well in Kigali, thinks that the ADF is somewhat supported. Let me first freeze that for a second. The ADF is also supported by a number of neighboring countries, okay? Okay? The ADF is also supported by a number of mining companies. The ADF is also supported by a number of other external forces. Okay, and this is precisely what Mwenda was talking about. It complicates the entire thing. Okay, at the regional level, it is important for Uganda, Rwanda, DRC, Kenya, Tanzania, for example, okay, and Mozambique, because now you have ADF sending trainers into Mozambique as well. Okay, so this is a regional. It requires a regional arrangement, and so the presence of our troops. I understand what the honourable is talking about here. I think I'll say something about it later. Okay, this is a legitimate reason for going to the DRC. Is it the only reason? Okay, that's another question. Okay, okay, but any government that wants to remain legitimate in its own society must, at the bare minimum, protect its people. And I think that is, in my opinion, for example, I think maybe the government messes up from time to time. It should have been pretty easy for the government, for example, to go to Parliament. It would have got a complete, overwhelming support, even just in terms of consultation. Okay? Because I don't think anybody who cares about this country, about our people, would say no to going after, right now, for now, perpetrators of what happened. But there's a question which I'm unable to answer, okay? Because we have so many other groups. And precisely what you're talking about, discontent within our society. Do we know really, for real, okay, as far as the government is concerned for now, what the government is telling us, the ADF is responsible. Is this credible intelligence? Is it possible that perhaps this is Al-Shabaab people coming in? Is it possible that perhaps one or two people who were disgruntled in our own society, for whatever reasons, were responsible for this? Okay, is there a connection between some of these groups? I am unable to answer, okay? But I know for sure that if I were in power, and our country is attacked, and the evidence suggests that the perpetrators came from country A, and we know who normally tends to come from country A, I'll go after that. Okay. So I think that is where we don't disagree. I think you have moved 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. Okay. There's no disagreement here. Okay. I think that the slight, what appears to be slight disagreement was what one of my brothers indicated, that the DRC government actually requested us to get it there. Whether or not they requested us, there is one basic fact: the two governments are in agreement and are working together. It's not an invention.
In fact, that's why I wanted to provide information. Just before Uganda deployed, first of all, President Museveni and President Tshisekedi met twice. President Tshisekedi did come here and have a conversation with President Museveni about the deployment and made the request. He came again when they were launching the construction of the roads, sometime I think in October. They had a joint meeting at Kasindi. On the Ugandan side it's called Impondwe, Congolese side it's called Kasindi. I don't know whether he followed the event. Then in November, there was a Congolese military team, security team. There was the Minister of Defense, the Command of the Army, and the Minister of Security. They came here and met their counterparts in Uganda, and a formal agreement between the two countries for the deployment was signed. What I can say is that from the time Uganda agreed with Congo to deploy, it lasted about 6 to 7 months before the deployment actually happened. So the bombs took place long after this agreement. And what happened during that period, the Congolese government would promise the government of Uganda, we are going to give you permission, then it would be stopped. It went on failing. The intelligence I have, at least from sources in Ugandan intelligence, is that Rwanda was really concerned about Uganda's deployment. And this is the other issue Professor Ogenga Otunu was raising, which I also think is very important. I always felt that Uganda needs, for our security in this region, we need cooperation, not confrontation. A diplomatic rapprochement with Kigali is a fundamental, should be a fundamental component of Uganda's regional policy. I think that our continued hostilities with Kigali complicate our deployment in Congo, because the government of Rwanda, and this President Kagame personally has told me 1,000,000 times, believes on the basis of the intelligence they have that the government of Uganda supports rebels hostile to Kigali, and that the government of Uganda is seeking regime change in Kigali, and that these rebels are based in North Kivu and South Kivu, in this eastern DRC. So, when we deploy there, what is going in Congo, and ultimately when we go to, we shall also deploy in North Kivu when we are doing the road to Goma, what is going to be the attitude of the government of Rwanda is a very important component in that. The second, when we go to Congo, even when we are still in Ituri, I put myself in the shoes of the government of Rwanda, which fears that Uganda is supporting the rebels. Won't Rwanda think that now we have a direct linkage between ourselves and the rebels we support? And if Rwanda believes that, what is Rwanda likely to do? And during all this process of deployment, Uganda government was saying, look, Rwanda is sabotaging us, Kagame is flying to Kinshasa to stop. Remember, the deployment took place when President Kagame was actually visiting Tshisekedi in Kinshasa. So this regional dimension, which Professor Ogengo Tunu has raised, is fundamental. And knowing the relations between the two countries, it is going to complicate our deployment there. What is going to be Rwanda's attitude? What are we doing to maybe allay the fears of Rwanda about our involvement there? In any case, Rwanda faces the same problem as Uganda from ADF. And therefore, it is better for us to work together as allies in the region, as members of the East African community, as Pan-Africanists, rather than be in confrontation with them. And from what I know, Rwanda's issues with Uganda are things that Uganda can actually address. They are not issues that if we sat around the table, they cannot be resolved. So that is going to be a sticking point. The other one is the international involvement. Remember that because ISIS, the Islamic State, has declared itself an ally of ADF, it has brought the world powers, especially the French, the Americans, and the British, to pick particular interest in ADF. So, in many ways, and this is what Fungaru, my grandson Fungaru may not know, this is a very big boon for Museveni, because Museveni was under pressure from the Western powers to reform in Uganda. When he was under that pressure, then comes ADF and gives him a
release of life.
A release of life, because by them attacking Uganda with their terror and then allying with ISIS, they have made Museveni a kingpin in the regional security agenda, and the security of this region will take precedence over democracy inside Uganda. And therefore, they are going to, if Museveni plays his cards very well, if he ensures that his strategy in Congo, especially the communications part of it, he does not get dragged into minerals and human rights abuses and things like that, he has these three allies, and once they begin working with him to root out ISIS from Congo and from this region.
Strength of a nation.
Welcome back. You're watching Citizen Voices, and our hashtag is Amplifying Citizen Voices. We have a panel of three that's discussing this veritable subject. What are the geopolitical implications of the UPDF's deployment inside the DRC? We have Professor Ogengo Tunu, a historian and scholar, Andrew Mwenda, a journalist, and Honorable Hassan Fungaru Kaps, who represents Obongi County in Parliament. Before we went to the break, we were discussing basically the extremes in the Congo. At one point, you have a failed state, very disintegrated, very fragmented society. And here we have the UPDF inside the Congo. At another extreme, you have, multinationals taking advantage of, the wealth of the Congo, one of the richest countries. In fact, when there's an Israeli billionaire, dollar billionaire, who has been indicted over trading in mineral wealth from war zones, Dan Gatland, there's talk that nothing happens in the Congo without the influence of Dan Gatland. But to be very precise, the UPDF, which has a history in the Congo, when they went into the Congo in the late 1990s and were taken to the International Court of Justice, and currently we are facing a lawsuit where the Congo government is demanding $4 billion. There's lots of temptation in that area. Then there's the regional dimension. Andrew Mwenda and Professor talked about Rwanda. Rwanda treating, this deployment with suspicion, and on the other hand, some kind of, undercurrent that Rwanda is doing some kind of and other regional players are doing some kind of tit for tat. We don't have that cogent evidence to prove that in terms of supporting the ADF. How does Uganda go about this kind of mission? On one hand, partly legitimate, it must protect its citizens within its boundaries across the Congo in a conflict which has a transnational and terrorist aspect. On the other hand, how does Uganda ensure that it carries out this very delicate balancing act to ensure that it doesn't get sucked into a regional conflict, doesn't become a kind of bogeyman in the region in regard to the DR Congo?
Yeah, thank you very much. What we should expect from the Congo is a mixture of proxy wars. You hear ADF. Since the ADF is the name which is now there may be other forces which may come and line themselves there and name themselves and call themselves ADF, including the Rwanda Uganda is fearing. If Rwanda doesn't deploy in the Congo like they did in the other round, when Uganda was there, what we popularly call as Kisangani 1, Kisangani 2, in the 1998, late or thereabout, you may expect people like from Angola, Mozambique, from the arm of SADC that came to fight and drive out Uganda from the Congo. But the thing here is this. If President Museveni gets the cooperation of the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi, does the President come with the support of the whole country of Congo? That's the question we should ask. This may lead even to the President of the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to have problems in its presidents and governance in courts. Because
actually it's going for an election.
Yes, and this is likely to be a problem. Congo has had a problem. By the way, there is a politics of the Democratic Republic of Congo involving the splitting of the Congo to create another country comprising of the bordering areas, regions of the Congo to Uganda, North Kivu, South Kivu, Maniema, and the Oriental Province, which is the one neighboring us from the side of West Nile. The question there is, if you divide the Congo in that way and create a new country, who is going to be in charge of that country? Will that person in charge be friendly or hostile to Museveni, friendly or hostile to Kagame? Now, unfortunately for my brothers and sisters in the Congo, it's like Congo has been ordained to be a country whose affairs should be determined morally by Uganda or Rwanda, whether they are good or not good. You see, there is a difference between morality and legality. When you talk about the legality, you may talk about things like, for example, agreements, laws, etc. But morally, is it okay for a country like Uganda to decide as and when it wants to invade a country and they go there? That's not okay for us. And this is a question for the African Union to address. The question of peacekeeping operations in the Congo, the UN has been there perpetually. Sometimes when I hear President Museveni criticizing the UN mission in the Congo, I also ask myself, really, does the UN have some kind of scale to audit themselves in terms of success or failures? That's the problem. That's how they provide room for President Museveni to attack them, and many people will do so. Now, the Congo, therefore, and all the people of the Congo must defend their sovereignty, their territorial integrity. ADF and the Uganda army under Museveni are the same. In that there are foreign forces who see it easy to watch, to march into their country. And they say, we are here, we have deployed. You accept, or if you don't accept, we overthrow you. I look at President Tshisekedi in that sense, that he is also a hostage of this force, this powerful Museveni in the region. That if you don't accept us and you don't say the way we want it, we shall link up with the Joseph Kabila. But Joseph Kabila is still very strong in the politics of the Congo. Recently, the UN and the international community, the West, ordered him that, hey, my friend, you scale down your things in Congo, you are overshadowing, you are doing things like this. Now, where does Kabila and his group and other political leaders of the Congo stand in this issue, vis-a-vis the stand of the President, His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi? Are they in support? Like Felix Tshisekedi seems to be portrayed here. All in all, I would like to say this. As long as President Museveni wants it, he will deploy people in South Sudan, in Congo, in Somalia, and he will drive the whole world to accept the reason for the deployment. But at the end of the day, when you edit, you check, you find that mistakes would have been made, and some people would have been sacrificed, and opportunities would have been lost. Parliament need to be supported. Ugandans must support our parliament now. The parliament is taken as a hostage. President Museveni's government doesn't respect the parliament. That's why they don't brief parliament on time. Even on the AMISOM mission, the Minister of Defense was asked to come and present a report as required by the rules of procedure of parliament, where parliament is supposed to be regularly updated about the forces outside Uganda. Up to now, that briefing has not been given to the members of parliament or the defense committee and even parliament as a whole. Now, this deployment has happened. They take parliament for granted. Parliament has been captured, actually disarmed.
Could it be the case that in warfare there are no rules? You remember the
Ugandans must support parliament because that is our voice. We must empower the voice of the people so that we govern the UPDF as required by law. We control the deployment.
Honorable,
yes.
Perhaps could it be the case that in warfare the conventional rules are discarded? We saw this.
Now, you see, that's why we still have these laws. We cannot say we discard them. If we say they are discarded, why should we have the constitution here? Why should we have these laws here and there? The issue of hot pursuit does not apply in this case of the ADF. The ADF has been there for a very long time. So the law of saying you can deploy to a foreign country in hot pursuit of your enemies applies in other circumstances, not this one here. What we need to say is that ADF and other rebel groups should come to Uganda, and we form a democratic country where it is the ballot, not the bullet, that works in accessing state power and retaining it. We in FDC, that is our position. That's why we have not taken up arms. Even when we are mistreated badly, we are harassed during elections, we are sought, we are fired at. FDC has not gone in that way because we want to teach people a new lesson. Finally, the issue of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, this invasion will not solve the problem of the ADF, that you remove the ADF. President Museveni deployed and announced and said that they had already removed the LRA. The same Museveni comes back and says the LRA is still around. They went to mobilize the people in the side of the mass media, they recruited companies to talk good, like this company called this NGO called Invisible Children. They wrote a lot of things about the LRA. They say LRA is finished, and again they say LRA is there. Now,
but is LRA still a national security threat to you?
I don't know. But tomorrow you will be surprised to hear that, like ADF, remember ADF was declared to be something irrelevant after having captured their leader. Their president is in the jails of Uganda. The leader of the ADF, Jameli Mukulu, is here. But now, why are you talking about the ADF as a problem again today after arresting their leader? So for me, what is very important is look at the situation that generates rebels in Uganda. You close the tap from there. You cannot mop a room which has water flooded without closing the tap, and you think you live in a dry room when the tap is still generating people.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable, what in essence you're saying is the president more or less is playing a game of brinkmanship in the volatile region. And Andrew also makes the point that perhaps this is a boon for the president, that he's been thrust into the crosshairs of this international global jihad war, which is going to suck in, I mean, the Western powers, including France and the others. But Professor, to bring you in, we're in Eastern Congo, a very rich, one of the richest parts in the entire world. We now have the fourth industrial revolution. You live in America, and the 3 C's, copper, coltan, and cobalt, are driving the new technological advancements in electric cars, in renewable energy, in pharmaceutical products, and all these kind of things. Is Uganda perhaps punching above its own weight with its deployment in the Congo? Because we're aware there are other players, including people like Dan Gatler, who is a diamond magnet. And there's lots of influence. The tech companies, the Googles and the others have a very keen interest in terms of, you know, the mineral exploitation to be able to sustain these products and, you know, keep up being very blue chip profitable companies.
Well, I think, let me first say one or two things about what the Honourable said. There's no doubt that the the experiment known as the DRC is a difficult one. Okay, and as we know that the central government doesn't control every part of the country, but I think once you have a president, a head of a state, and the head of state goes to another head of state and says, look here, we are willing to work with you. I think that international relations, that is good enough, because every government has its own crisis at home. You'll always find groups within the country, each country, that don't agree with what the head of state or the government wants to do. Even within a government, okay, even within a department or a ministry, okay, you always have tension. So I think the fact that maybe Felix is not as powerful, and therefore his agreement with the president should not mean much. I think that we can put aside for a while. Just before I get back to your point here, secessionism has always been an important hallmark in the history of the DRC. Okay, each time there is a crisis, the people want to secede, and that is going to be there for some time. Back to your question. Let me first answer my question, and I can answer my own question first. I think what the Honourable mentioned here is important in terms of if we want to address this particular crisis, we have to look at the root causes of the crisis, okay? Because terrorism is war, and war is politics by other means. Yes. And politics deals with allocation of power resources, who gets what, when, how, in what proportion, and the implications in terms of responsibility, obligation, legitimacy. And so in the context of what we are going through, it is important that sometimes what is necessary is not possible given the time frame. What is necessary is to address all the root causes so that the ADF ceases to be there. But maybe right now what is possible is first to chase them, get rid of them as best as possible. Guns don't, war can destroy, can kill the protagonists. War will never kill discontent. War will never kill profound crisis of legitimacy, will never kill profound injustices in society, okay? And so the root causes of all these are some perceived, and can be objective, subjective, perception may not agree with it, there's some perceived injustice, okay? And therefore it's important for us, and I'm talking about this because you know, the history is very clear. Today, we're here, things seem to be fine. There are people who feel this unhappy with how things are done. Perhaps they were blocked from voting the way they should have been voted. Perhaps someone kicked them where they should not have been kicked. We can ignore them right now, but tomorrow, things will change. And if things change tomorrow, do we want to go back to the same old system whereby in 1971, for example, Obote is overthrown, people demonstrate in the street of Kampala all over the place, hundreds of thousands of the Cholis and Langu have been slaughtered. Okay, Amin was a liberator. Amin goes, everyone who came from West Nile was Amin's man.
Tortured,
we turn West Nile into a graveyard.
Yes.
Okay.
Up to South Sudan and Congo.
The crisis continued. We turned Luero into a graveyard. Okay. I don't want us to have a moment 5, 10, 30 years from now where my brothers and sisters who come from Western Uganda, more so who come from Ankole, okay, will have difficulty going back home. It has happened before. And I'm saying this, you know, I'm doing some work with Operation Wealth Creation. I'm doing some work with General Salim on its instruction, helping people in northern Uganda. Okay, so I'm saying this in good faith, that we need to take time to begin to address some of the root causes. Okay, and we can do them over a period of time. And I think it's important to do that, and I think that is where my brother comes in. Okay?
Yes, that's where I come from. Yes.
Okay, so I think we need to address that. It doesn't mean it's not either or. Okay, I think
That's the
right
way.
now we go after the ADF. We find space, okay, to begin to have some dialogue, okay, to listen to other people's perspectives, to feel whatever pain they feel. We may not agree with them entirely. We don't have to.
To stop Muslim profiling in the country.
Yes.
But those are some of the things, because when people are aggrieved, okay, you create space for this content. And that's all I'm saying here. In terms of where we are in the DRC, I think we can buy time. Mwenda's put it very clearly. Okay, right now the world is, and this is one funny thing with the Western world. Okay, I think the way the world is constructed is that there are boxes. You're either in this box or in that box. So now essentially is conflict between Islam and Christianity, okay, and the ADF is trying to tap into that to get some support. So the president will get support, but it's also important to understand, and this is I cannot give an advice to the president, okay. I think the president has time now to begin to address some of the domestic issues, okay. In a non-confrontational way. I'm not saying it's being confrontational. Some of our people are aggrieved. Let us listen to them. Let us find a middle ground. We can do it. Okay, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Because where I come from in this time is, I want the government to succeed like yesterday. Why? Because every single day that our government doesn't succeed, our people suffer a lot. My concern is not about who is in power. My concern is about providing some basic services that are needed to our ordinary people. And that is not an academic debate. That let us wait after 4 years. Those who want to take over power can wait for 2 or 3 years for election. Mine is today, and today is I want the government to succeed. And for the government to succeed, it must begin to address some of these issues. That is where I come from, okay? I'm not interested in 4 years from now. Okay? I'm not interested in power. I'm interested in government succeeding, because if our government succeeds, our people succeed.
Yeah, the next question. Oh. Professor, the other question that I asked.
Oh, in terms of our presence in the DRC?
Yes, please.
The complication because of all these other interests.
Yeah.
It is complicated. I think Mwenda's already mentioned. The DRC is a messy place, and particularly 2 provinces because now the ADF moved a little bit from North Kivu into Ituri. Some of their members are still there, okay, in North Kivu, and that is where we have almost close to about 120 armed militias. We have all these interests.
Now, let me give you some, help you here, Professor.
Yes.
The risk we have in the Congo, given my brother's explanation, even what I know, and where we agree on this with him is this. There are different forces in the Congo. Some of them are native to the Congo. Suppose ADF finds one which is strong enough, one which controls territory, and then they house the ADF and they mix together with them. Will the government of Uganda get them out of that place? It is not possible. Which means the ADF will be there, mixed with those people, and they get support and they continue disturbing. Look at the situation of Somalia. No amount of force is enough to remove an armed group, as long as the armed group has the local support from its population, whether you like them or not. Look at Al-Shabaab today. Al-Shabaab has a big control of territory and affairs of the country called Somalia. When Uganda went there with a big force, other countries including Kenya, Burundi were there. Even the United States of America, EU, Italians, they have people there. They have not defeated that place. So my point of contention is this, that will the force eradicate the ADF from there? The answer definitely is no.
Okay, let me answer the question now. I think it is possible for our government to define this mission narrowly.
Yes.
To degrade, and it's now doing it, it can come back. It doesn't have to stay there, because the longer it stays, the more complicated it becomes for us. Okay, I'm sure that the government can think through and make some arrangement in terms of intelligence and regional cooperation. Okay, I think I agree with.
You see, Professor, the problem we have is we're actually in the dark, because the government of Uganda has not yet gone to Parliament. I think the law allows them to go after 3 weeks or something and give an explanation. And I am waiting to hear the president's explanation, because the problem is much more complicated than ADF.
Definitely.
And our deployment right now, and the little explanation we have, is centered around ADF. ADF is one component of a bigger problem, because, as I said at the beginning, ADF, first of all, without Uganda deploying ground troops, it would be difficult for it to mop up ADF, in which case it would have to say, we will use air and artillery to degrade, you do the mop-up operation, MONUSCO and FADC. But neither Uganda nor Kinshasa believes that FADC and MONUSCO can do the mop-up operations, so we must deploy on the ground. If you deploy on the ground, it means you must establish presence and administration in order to ensure stability. The problem is, immediately you establish presence and administration in that area of your military control, then you are sucked into the other subsidiary problems that are not part of ADF. There are local militias there. There are ethnic differences between the Gegere.
Actually, what I wanted to ask.
Hold a second.
Yes.
So, for me, there's something they call mission creep. You see, when the Americans went to Vietnam, they had very clear and short-term objectives. They stayed there for 15 years and left when they were at square zero, because, of course, the Viet Cong finally took over. When they went to Afghanistan in 2001, they went there specifically to remove the Taliban. The day they left, the Taliban took off. After 20 years and $2 trillion spent, they were back to square one. Even Uganda, if Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, and Ethiopia withdrew from Somalia today, Al-Shabaab would be in Mogadishu tomorrow. So the lesson we take from these external invasions is that they rarely lead to success. For success to come, it must come from the internal political forces and military forces there on the ground. Either the different sides fight each other to a stalemate and find mutual accommodation more profitable than further combat, or one side secures a decisive military victory and the other side is unable to mount relatively unified counteraction to stop a project of state reconfiguration and reform. So in that event, I don't see how our presence in Congo and the multifaceted nature of the problems of Congo gives us an exit option. What is that exit option? One, if we have degraded ADF, what of the security for the infrastructure we are doing, and which is also vital for our economy? These infrastructure projects are likely to take the next 3 to 5 years. Assuming, okay, the infrastructure was not even on the table. Once we have occupied and we are doing these mop-up operations, but we are in an area where the Gegere are killing the Lendu. What is UPDF's attitude? To watch them kill each other in its own sphere of administration and control? And if we reach there and find all these minerals, and what is the protection we have that our troops will not be dragged into that trade? And once they are dragged into coltan and gold and diamonds, then that becomes a perpetuating factor. You know, there are initial causes, but then there are propellers of a process. You may reach there and vested interests now take over from the initial aim. Now you go to subsidiary inducements that perpetuate your stay there. So I don't know whether there is a think tank within the UPDF, within the NRM party, within the government of Uganda, where people sit and try to tease out these issues. When we have entered this country, with all the maelstrom of activities we know inside there, the ethnic conflicts, the militias and the ADF, the international cartels of diamond and timber trading, and internal politics of Congo. Remember, we have an election in Congo where we're not even sure our ally, Tshisekedi, will even win an election. In fact, our deployment, hold this, your breath, Emmanuel, our deployment there may cause him defeat because the vast majority of Congo don't believe Uganda should occupy their territory. So if he loses, what becomes of our stay there? All of these issues, I really would like to see UPDF and Ministry of Defense discussing them. Andrew,
perhaps an honorable, you could answer this.
Yes.
In the past, exactly what you're talking about, this very complex structure and the plethora of militias in these places, Masisi, Rushuru, and the international syndicate to plunder Congo is playing out. And what happened in the past, as we saw, is the UPDF sided with a certain faction.
Yes.
Pierre Bemba, Wamba Diawamba, and the others.
Yes.
The Mai Mai sided with other governments.
Yes.
What if, during this deployment, there's that temptation that is going to light that tinderbox, and a militia, for instance, attacks a proxy militia on behalf of a certain country within the region, attacks the UPDF, and now this draws in other nations into play, and they come into the DR Congo. Have we, like the panelists are arguing, has the state or the players or the guys who are behind this deployment run a hypothesis to examine all these kind of scenarios?
Now, let's borrow an example from South Sudan, here where we had deployed troops also. UPDF, and now we came out of the South Sudan with the similar arrangements. That was what was called SOFA, the Status of Forces Agreement.
Yes, yes.
SOFA is what it defines the forces when they go there. What uniform do they wear? How do they look like? What are they going to do? This kind of things. Even if they are passing, going.
Perhaps is this mission under SOFA?
Something. This is SOFA here is nothing political in the sense of solving the problems there. So this is,
and there's a very thin line between SOFA and...
The SOFA doesn't address the issues of legitimacy so much.
The belligerent occupation.
Yeah. SOFA is about an agreement of your status as a force in that country. What are you doing? What are you? And are you traveling? Or how do you look like? These kind of things.
Actually,
so for the South Sudan, what has worked in the interest of Salva Kiir? Some people, for me, I have come to respect Salva Kiir, by the way. Salva Kiir played this politics very well to put down the rebellion in his country. He knew an armed force, deployment of forces would not work, because there was a big force already under IO and other groups. The best thing was to get the leader of the IO into the capital city. They have done that. So Riek Machar is in Juba. But this one has worked against the forces and against the power of Riek Machar. If they were to get Jamil Mukulu here, and Jamil Mukulu sits as a free person here, then Jamil Mukulu would divide the ADF. Some ADF would come and they want positions in the government.
So you're suggesting that Jamil, who is facing war crimes, terrorism, yes, and all these, gross acts should, just walk.
You see, this is about solving a problem. You remember the South Sudan problem? Massacres, accusations, and counter-accusations. Riek Machar was supposed to be accused and taken to the ICC. Even Salva Kiir was supposed to be accused and taken to the ICC. Actually, but South Sudanese people said no.
Actually, Riek was indicted for as way back as 1991 for the board massacre.
Yes, Barre these differences. Let's go for peace. My brother Riek Machar, come to the capital. If you want your position as the first vice president, you come, it is here. Salva gave him. But what has happened to the IO? Though I don't support it, but I am talking as an analyst. A weather station person who reads conditions of the weather, the clouds, and says rain is going to come, is not a rainmaker. When the rain comes, don't praise him or blame him. So for me, I'm an analyst. Now, what is happening in South Sudan for the good of Salva Kiir's regime is that the forces of Riek Machar are disintegrating. Because people now, some of them have lost the gut of fighting, the zeal to fight. They want positions in the government. Riek Machar has to appoint some people, but he cannot appoint all of them. So President Museveni's strategy, which worked for the other rebel groups before, should have worked here in this case of saying, okay, you people, you come here. What are you fighting for? Come. But you have arrested one person, Jamil Mukulu. The organization has actually, in my reading and analysis, ADF has been grown stronger than what it was when Jamil Mukulu was there. That's why you now need a full air force with the modern aircrafts to bomb, modern artillery to bomb, and you are still going there, talking about invasion, because the force is growing stronger.
Honorable,
lastly, on
I respectively disagree with you in the case of South Sudan.
Yes.
In fact, that policy of Salva Kiir is quite flawed. Where he tries to placate militias and rebel groups by giving them land cruisers and positions, totally spectacularly has failed. In essence, it only encourages someone else to rebel.
Now, you see, the thing is, at least he has been able to buy a day or two on the seat of power by making people sift their objectives from the one of pursuing state power to the one of pursuing wealth. Well, you can give when you are in the...
Georgia Thor,
so,
David Yao Yao,
yeah, you see,
Paul Malong, Cyrilo. So how
David
many
Yao
are
Yao is no longer fighting.
Yes.
David Yao Yao
but
with the government.
there are 10 David Yao Yaos
You
that
see,
have
now
emerged
for
in
me,
football, and
what I see is that the South Sudanese people need to be studied, and the example they have in their country, even from the time of their rebellion, is a good thing to learn from. When the South Sudanese were fighting under John Garang, they had so many people with PhDs as rebels, which means they had intellectuals ideas like this. Well, and then here, on the case of the ADF, the problem we now have is this. We hear about ADF, but we don't hear from the ADF about ADF. Muslim clerics, my own brothers and sisters in Islam, are being victimized here in town, in Kampala. Many have been arrested. They have been killed for ADF. Where is the real ADF? Let the real ADF talk about their own things, not to make sheikhs to be incriminated and be shot.
Yes,
that's the thing.
I think
so
that
I stand with the sheikhs, and I pray that they should not be victimized. Let the goal of ADF be given to the ADF. Let the ADF people talk about themselves as rebels and why are they fighting. They should not be making people to all be Muslims to be called rebels, terrorists, etc. No?
I agree with you.
I don't like that.
Yeah, Muslim profiling is
so my own sense is that I think the challenge of ADF should not be reduced to an individual, whether it's Mukulu or whoever. I think we need to look at it is what Professor Ogenga, rather Ogenga Otuno said this before. You know, you have a brother called Ogenga Latugo, whom I'm so used to. What are the root causes? It is possible that within the Muslim community there is a sense of alienation, a sense of discrimination that we need to deal with. That is much more than dealing with Mukulu. I personally have dealt with the largest section of the Muslim community are the Tablighs. Their leader is Sheikh Kamoga. In Kampala city alone, they have 833 mosques. They are the largest presence in Uganda. I have had conversations with them, and they have issues. They raise, they say, one, we have schools. The government of Uganda supports religious founded schools across the country, including Islamic ones, but except those of the Tablighs, who constitute about 80% of the Muslims of Uganda. So we may support Chibuli as what we call government-aided schools, but Tabligh schools are not supported by the state of Uganda because they are considered terrorist training cells. They say, we have a large presence in Uganda. There is not a single government official of Uganda who is a Tabligh. Whether it's an RDC, an ambassador, a minister, or anything, we are excluded from power. They have had issues of a mosque here, which court awarded them, but the faction of Mwebaje is still occupying it, and the government police is protecting that illegality. So I have listened to these people, and they have had meetings with government, with the president, with everybody who matters. And I also feel like if Uganda government addressed these issues, that for me is a much more important response to an underlying sense of grievance than having to appease Mukulu, an individual. In fact, I believe that you may not even have to deal with ADF directly, but you can deal with the sources of anger, discontent within the Tabligh sect, which feeds into ADF, and therefore cut the tap that feeds the ADF. So I think that the government of Uganda has been either reluctant or unable, for whatever reasons, to really get involved in these issues, and I do not know why. So now we return to Congo. You see, if you are a country, if you are an individual, you can decide, you can choose your neighbor, you can choose your friend. But if you are a country, you can't choose your neighbor. Congo, we are stuck with it. In fact, Uganda, we are so unlucky that we are located in a very bad geographic area. To our north is South Sudan with what I would call a failed state. In Congo, we are caught up with a country which has an absentee state in the east. The state there has failed. Beyond, we are seeing Ethiopia beginning to unravel. And then there is Somalia, which has failed. Then we have Central African Republic, which is also our neighbor, and we have deployed our troops there at one time. It is a failed state. And therefore, Uganda can never run away from the security implications of the failures of these states. So us to be dragged there is inevitable. I'll give you an example. When Uganda intervened in the Congo in 2013 December, I opposed our intervention because I'm always very reluctant to support intervention. Then the president called me and he said, you are making a mistake to say that we have intervened to solve problems of Congo. We have intervened in, rather to solve problems of South Sudan. We have intervened in South Sudan for our own national security interests.
Actually, Professor Dan Mudola, the late, made a very compelling argument.
So, but let me tell you what the
yes,
President Museveni told me. He said we have deployed there for the following reasons. One, if the government in Juba fell,
yes.
we are not sure that the rebels who are coming would establish a stable political order. They would create anarchy there. That would create a space for
Spillover.
LRA to return and use South Sudan as a launching pad to attack Uganda. So we needed to strengthen the government there in order to keep a stable administration and ensure that we don't have to give a sanctuary to ADF. Two,
To LRA.
yes, he felt that if the rebels take over, there will be an orgy of killings, and that will lead to a massive influx of refugees into Uganda, which will also put a lot of pressure in northern part of the country. And he also said there are so many Ugandans who were trading, honorary Ugandans in South Sudan, who would also be killed. So there was a humanitarian intention to go there and also protect those Ugandans and their Ugandan interests. So if we are going to Congo right now, I'm sure we have our interests. For me, the issue is not our entry there. It is for us to define our aims clearly, understand our limitations, because we cannot solve those problems of Congo, and have an exit strategy that allows us to minimize our casualty rate, our costs, but while at the same time maximizing our gains. And up to now, I'm still waiting for somebody from UPDF, from Parliament, from Cabinet to come to Uganda and explain this is the challenge we face, and this is how we intend to solve it.
Professor, perhaps you fire the last shot here. We are very aware about the case at The Hague, at the International Court of Justice, where Congo sued us, and there's quite, I think the decision will be taken in December, and Uganda failed a counter memorial where one of the grounds succeeded, but in essence Congo is asking for $4 billion. Could this be an opportunity? We've been engaging in a lot of rapprochement with Kinshasa to use this window that they're allowing us. There's this bit of goodwill with the establishment in Kinshasa to try and renegotiate and have a settlement which is amicable, which both parties agree.
Well, I think the last time the lawyers for the government of the DRC raised this issue was in May, and they were asking now for about 4.6 billion.
Yes, dollars.
Which it means what they're asking for is coming down. I think a meaningful conversation. The thing here is, if it depends on what precisely the president wants and how he wants it done, because Uganda's neighbors today are as suspicious of our intentions as, for example, Kenya was under Moi. Okay, under Moi, Kenya, essentially, the president was shaking every day. Okay, he could hardly sleep because he told himself that our president could organize for his removal anytime. Okay, I think perhaps in Tanzania we are fine, where there is no problem. Kigali we are fine in the sense that Kagame has drawn the line somewhere. In the DRC, okay, the current government knows that they can be removed anytime, because actually, I mean, let's face it, and I mean the way Felix was elected, quote unquote, okay, this was just an arrangement essentially. Okay. Okay. No, it was an arrangement.
Yeah.
Okay. It was an arrangement.
Yeah, and Uganda played a role there.
And the international community.
It was an arrangement.
Self-pay of hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think right now we can negotiate. Okay. But the negotiation will have to wait until, unfortunately, until after the election. Because if you negotiate now, and I think Felix is willing. Felix government will be willing.
Yeah.
Okay. But if it does it right now, it will commit suicide, political suicide.
Exactly.
On the eve of the election. Okay. Because you have the rest of the DRC that wants very little to do with an arrangement between us.
Exactly.
Okay.
The elite, yes.
Yeah. But I think it can go there. But perhaps what is more important is for us. I still pray, I hope and pray, I petition that the president defines our mission very narrowly, so we can come back and avoid all this other headache.
Yeah, we've run out of our time. Thank you very much. We've been discussing what are the geopolitical implications of our mission in the DR Congo. What is our strategy? Are we the anchorman of stability in this volatile pocket of the world? Are we the aggressor? What is our exit strategy? And how can we address the underlying issues in regard to how perhaps we treat our Muslims in this country? How are we going to ensure that we address their suspicion and ensure that we have a peaceful resolution to, these conflicts that we're dealing with. We've been discussing once again the issue of what are the geopolitical implications on citizen voices. We had a panel, including Professor Genga Otunu, who is a historian, Andrew Mwenda, the old man of the clan and journalist, and Honorable Hassan Kaps Fungaru, who represents Obongi County, and in the last parliament served as the Shadow Defense and Internal Affairs Committee chairperson. I've been Shadow Minister, yes. I've been your host, Emmanuel Mutaiziwa, and have a pleasant evening.